Tyron Woodley versus Vicente Luque takes place this weekend in the co-main event of UFC 260, Miocic versus Ngannou 2, and I can't wait for this co-main event in the welterweight division. In all honesty, this probably shouldn't be the co-main event of a pay-per-view, let's just say it how it is. However, with the recent fallout of Volkanovski versus Ortega, I guess this can take the number 2 spot on the card. It's not the strongest card overall, but I love this fight because this is a huge fight for the welterweight division. Vicente Luque re-grinded his way back to the top to now take on another guy who he's got to get past here in Tyron Woodley. He's failed at this part of his career so many times before. He was doing quite well in the UFC. He loses to Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards starts going right up the division and eventually gets himself into the top 5. Then he grinds his way back up, gets a couple more wins in a row, takes on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, fails at that attempt as well, and Wonderboy is now in the top 5 of the division. Now he's got a chance against Tyron Woodley after getting 2 more big wins in his career, one over Nico Price and one over Roundy Brown, which are really dangerous guys outside those rankings of the welterweight division. Vicente Luque has been through murderer's row so many times over and over again in his career, and this time he's going to try and get past the people that he has not managed to get past before, and that is the top 10, top 5 guys of the division. And I think he is going to pass this test with flying colours against Tyron Woodley, because Woodley is in a completely different time of his career. Luque's the up-and-comer. He's rising. He's grinded his way to the top. He's still hungry. He wants to finally break into a place where he's never been before, but Woodley is in the part of his career where he's trying to get back into a place that he's since slipped away from, because he used to be the champion of the welterweight division, was on his way to really achieving big things in the welterweight division in terms of legacy, about how many times he was going to defend his belt. Joe Rogan was already talking about him being maybe the greatest welterweight of all time, which is absolutely ridiculous because no one so far is close to GSP's legacy haul. But either way, they were talking about Woodley in a couple of more defenses after the Usman fight, maybe going down as the greatest welterweight of all time, and he was on his way to being a really dominant welterweight champion. But then he loses to Usman, comes back against well, it was first off Leon Edwards, but that gets cancelled, and then he then takes on Gilbert Burns, loses that fight as well. Then he tries to come back against Colby Covington. It's a huge fight for him, a massive name and a massive polar opposites in terms of characters. They hate each other. There was a build up for the fight. It was a massive event, big chance for Woodley to get back in the spotlight, and what does he do again? He just fucking backs up against the cage for another 5 rounds. And it's really tough to watch because it's just the same style matchup over and over again. If you have a good grappling base and you can put pressure and volume striking on Tyron Woodley, you will always be able to do very well against him, because he does not know when to uncork that big shot, because he's constantly backing up against the cage, worried about being hit and also worried about being taken down as well, which is one thing that differentiates Vicente Luque from the recent opponents of Tyron Woodley, and we'll talk about that in a second. However, even before Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns and Usman performed this game plan on Tyron Woodley, other fighters have used this game plan as well. Rory McDonald, Jake Shields pressured him, backed him up against the cage, threw a lot of volume, went for takedowns as well, and it really did affect Woodley's game plan. He does not like these matchups, and I think Luque's a really good grappler and a really underrated grappler as well in that division. He can grapple if he wants to. We saw that in the Leon Edwards bout. He had like 5 minutes of control time against Leon Edwards, showed really good grappling there, and he's really got good clinch control as well against Roundy Brown. He'd back him up against the cage in the clinch, then get that head control and then start going for some knees to the face, eventually finish the fight in that position as well. So against the cage and in the grappling, Luque's got some things, but really on the feet is where Luque does his best work, and I think he's just going to be too physically imposing for Tyron Woodley to do anything against, because I think a lot of people are going to realise come weigh-in day, Luque's a really big guy compared to Woodley, okay? Like, these other welterweights that we've seen Woodley against in Gilbert Burns, a former 155er, like, if you look at Gilbert Burns next to Vicente Luque, Luque's a really big welterweight, and I'm not saying it like he's 6'3", I think he's 5'11" or something like that, but he's big feature-wise. He's got a massive torso, he's got a giant anvil of a head, he's got big hands, he's got a reach advantage over Woodley here as well, which is not something we often see. Woodley's always been one of those weird guys who's been shorter than all of his opponents, but has still had a little bit of reach to keep up with them, and that's given a lot of guys problems in the past, much like Alexander Volkanovski actually in the featherweight division, a shorter guy with a longer reach. Guys find it hard to get on the inside of those kinds of opponents, but Vicente Luque's got the reach, he's got the size, he's got the intimidation factor in my opinion as well. I just don't know why Woodley would take this one, and I think it's either because he's just fighting for the last fight of his contract and he wants to get out of his contract and then go to Bellator and start making some better money maybe, who knows, against some lesser competition opponents, or maybe he really wants to see if he's still got it. Because if you do beat Vicente Luque, you're actually still a top contender in the welterweight division, because you can beat Vicente Luque, and Luque's beaten guys like really good opponents like Belal Muhammad. We just saw him perform against Leon Edwards not too long ago. That fight ended in an eye poke. Luque dusted up Belal Muhammad immediately into their fight by first round KO. He's not a joke in this division. He's a very dangerous man, and if Woodley does get a win against him, Woodley's right back on top, and that's a huge, huge factor for this fight. But one thing that Luque has in... What's the word? One thing Luque has in... God! What? That word was just in my head. One thing that's the same that Luque has compared to Woodley's former opponents is that he one similarity! Fuck! I'm 6 minutes in, I ain't fucking starting this again. That's so annoying. That word was in my fucking head and it just fucking disappears when I need it. I was saving that for now. One similarity that Luque has with the former opponents of Tyron Woodley is that he trained or still trains at Sanford MMA, like Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. I think they're going to have a great game plan to go out there and beat Woodley. I'm sure that's a little bit of a mental thing for Woodley as well, going in there, knowing that the guy that you're fighting in Vicente Luque is going to be around Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman and Henry Hooft, the people that have formulated game plans to beat you before. I know Usman's now training with Trevor Whitman, but he goes back to Sanford MMA now and again, so I'm sure he's going to be giving some teasers and some little tips to Vicente Luque to know how to beat you. But I feel like Woodley's going to struggle here against Vicente Luque. He's a huge guy. He's got great stand-up. He's got a great chin as well. But one thing I worry about is sometimes he takes so many shots. But I feel like the only reason Luque goes down to shots sometimes is because there's so many of them. Eventually, he can't take any more from his opponent. Like, it's a real... You've got to break down Luque volume-wise. Like, Wonderboy was doing nothing to Luque's chin in those early rounds. He was cracking him a couple of times, but Luque's really good under pressure. Once he gets hit by a big shot, he recovers well. He stays in tune. Keeps his guard up nice and well, waits for his moments to fire back and get some momentum and turn the fight around. We saw this against Vicente Luque, or not against Vicente Luque, we saw this against Nico Price. Price, when he fought Luque, was landing some good shots, doing well against Luque, looking to go in there and land some even bigger shots on Luque, and Luque would stay coiled up and land a big shot back on Nico Price and actually drop Nico Price in one of those rounds and sunk him down, then went for like a dash choke or something like that. But Vicente Luque, he's got submissions, he's got some grappling if he needs it, but I think he's going to go out there, leg kick at Woodley, land some good jabs, and just start picking at him with that body kick that Colby was using so well, because Colby Covington does not get enough credit for this, but he landed that body kick a lot of times against Tyron Woodley, and that's going to break your ribs. And there was one moment in the fight where Woodley did break his ribs, and it wasn't when he was in that guillotine position and started to tap out afterwards. That was not when his ribs broke, in my opinion. Woodley's ribs broke when Colby kicked him in the ribs, and Woodley literally visibly taps his ribs on his body and goes, oh, and starts like stifling a little bit of a feeling out of him. Like, it was a really good kick to the body that Colby landed, and Vicente Luque has got really underrated body kicks, and I think he's going to land them very well against Tyron Woodley. I think he's going to be looking for them as well, and I think Woodley, once he takes a couple of those body kicks to the ribs, I think he's going to start thinking, you know what? That rest period that I had to heal those ribs was a very long time. Maybe I don't want to be in here anymore. And once he feels the power of Luque, which is just at a completely different level than guys like Colby Covington, who is Woodley's last opponent, I think it's going to bring out a Woodley who doesn't want to move forward, who wants to back up against the cage, and I think we're going to be looking at 18 rounds in a row that Woodley has not shown up for and lost, and I think Luque is going to get the job done by 30-27, unanimous decision. I don't see Woodley getting this one done. I think he's got a big chance because, again, Luque does take a lot of shots on the chin. He seems to pride himself on the fact that he can take those shots. You don't really want to take those shots off of Tyron Woodley too often, but Woodley doesn't even throw too often, and Luque has a higher output rate than Colby Covington does. I just checked the stats right now. Luque's output rate is absolutely ridiculous. The pace that this man fights at, he literally never has a boring fight ever in his career. I think he's going to go out there, have no respect for Woodley, and start hitting him early. And I think the difference between Luque and Woodley's former opponents is Woodley's safe with his former opponents to back up and sort of take a couple of shots. Like, Colby's not going to KO you against the cage with a 1-2. But Luque really has the ability to KO Tyron Woodley out cold here. think that's going to really play into Woodley's mindset in this fight. And I think as soon as he loses the first couple of exchanges in the first round, I think there's going to be a few good exchanges. Maybe Woodley lands a couple of good shots with his hands, maybe a couple of good leg kicks as well. Luque is going to start landing back. I think after those first few exchanges, if Luque is still there in front of Woodley after landing a couple of shots of his own, I think Woodley's just going to back up against the cage and start, you know, not wanting to get finished rather than wanting to get a win, because I feel like that's what we're seeing with Tyron Woodley. And I honestly feel like that's what we've seen with Tyron Woodley his entire career, because other than landing the big shots, all he does is back up against the cage and wait. Like against Darren Till, I mean, not really much happened in that first round, and he waited for Darren Till to try and set up some weird uppercut combination situation, and then Woodley lands the big shot over the top and gets to finish. Against Wonderboy, backing up against the cage the entire fight long, waiting for his moments. In one of the bouts, he caught Wonderboy's leg and went for a takedown early, but other than that, he was just on his back against the cage, waiting for Wonderboy to do something and slip up so he can catch him. In the later rounds, he eventually caught Wonderboy, and that's how he won those fights, even though I believe that maybe Wonderboy should have won the rematch and Woodley should have won the first fight. Either way, Tyron Woodley does this against opponents. I know he was injured against Damian Maia, but again, backing up, waiting for Maia to make mistakes, looking to defend takedowns. I think we've seen this all before, and I think Luque's got bigger consequences than anyone who's fought Woodley recently. He's a giant guy, and people are going to realise that on the weigh-ins, and I think he's going to outsize Woodley, out-impose Woodley in the cage, back Woodley up against the cage, and even when he gets to the cage with Woodley, his clinch control's really good. He works really well in the clinch. He's got submissions to go for. He's bigger than his opponents usually, so he does like to tie up the head and maybe risk a dash choke or something like that, but he likes to land knees while he's got the head position as well. I don't see Woodley winning this one, man. I can maybe see him surviving to a decision. I don't see him winning this one against Vicente Luque. I think it's going to be a really bad fight for him. He's going to take a lot of big shots. I think he's going to lose the first round. It's going to be a fun first round. Then Luque's just going to cruise control the second and third while Woodley's looking for big shots against the cage. But Luque is going to be picking at him from a distance, landing those leg kicks, really starting to back down Woodley and really break him down as the fight goes on. I think Woodley's going to be shooting for some takedowns. I don't see him really being able to control Vicente Luque on the ground whatsoever. He has a good chance to do it, don't get me wrong. He could end up in a top position and do quite good there. But Luque's really good at getting back to his feet. He takes his time. He's very patient on the ground. He likes to stay close to his opponents. Really good get-ups, really good takedowns of his own. I don't see Woodley getting this one done. But the fact that he's a massive underdog, he's worth the money putting on him, in all honesty. The fact that Woodley is this big of an underdog, Luque should not be like the big favourite that he is. I don't know what he is now in the odds, but when this first opened, Vicente Luque was a ridiculous favourite over Tyron Woodley. It's still Tyron Woodley. He has power to land those big shots, but now, 38 years of age for Tyron Woodley. He's a little bit older. His ribs are a little bit more broken. He's taken a little bit more damage. He's another 5 rounds of losing throughout his career. He just doesn't seem to be in the same shape anymore either way. Like, it's just, you look at Woodley at Strikeforce, you look at Woodley at fucking the start of his UFC career when he was on the rise in the welterweight division. He just has slowly degraded in shape overall over that time. And now he looks a little bit soft. So, I don't know what Woodley's going to do. He's not even good at rapping, so I don't know what he's going to do after this one. I think it's going to be Bellator, in all honesty. I think Luque's going to get the job done. 30-27, but the winner of this fight is going to be in a really good position. I think if Luque wins, he could be maybe looking at a Damian Maia fight, or maybe even a Michael Chiesa fight, something along these lines. If Woodley wins, I know for a fact he's probably going to call out one of the Diaz brothers. I think that's a perfect fight for him to get right now. Nate or Nick Diaz, either one of them. Nate or Nick Diaz, all they want is a top contender to really fight them so they can not have to go through the meat grinder of the lower part of the division to get back to the top. So if Woodley wins, I'm sure he'll call out Nate or Nick Diaz. I know they had some beef before about apparently fighting not too long ago. Before Woodley defended against Till, I know he was talking a lot about fighting Bisping and Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz and all of these big names. He wanted those money fights. So maybe if he gets a big win here, he can move himself up the rankings and be looking at something big in his future. But I just don't see it happening for Woodley. 15 rounds in a row. I think it's going to be 18. I think Luque's going to beat him every single round here. On the feet, landing the bigger shots. Man, Woodley is just... what a fall from grace. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching the video. Click that button up there. Goodbye. Luque 30-27. Unanimous decision. See you later.